G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Shawn Shewchuk from Change Your Results. He's based in Calgary in Canada. Thanks for your time today, Shawn.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. One of your team members reached out and thought you'd be a great guest to have on the cast.
Well, I hope they're right.
We'll find out in about 30 minutes. I'll let you know. Let's tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
That's a great question. So as you noted in your brief introduction, I run a company called Change Your Results. And for 28 or so years, I have done that work with well over 12,000 clients from all over the world. And it is definitely in coaching, although coaching is not something we sell. What we focus on with folks is the outcomes and results. And I feel that over the course of the last 10 or so years, that's the idea of coaching has shifted somewhat from what it should be, in my opinion, which is the results of the folks that, in this case, I have the privilege and our team has the privilege to work with, to more about a cookie cutter approach. So we don't subscribe to that. But that's I have the privilege. A vast majority of our clients in the United States and Canada, but certainly work Australia, New Zealand, UK, and a few other countries as well.
Yeah, great. How did you start out?
How much time do you have?
We've got plenty.
I grew up as a farm kid and vowed I'd never be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I thought it was the most horrible way to ever work or make a living. And after finishing high school, moved from a tiny, small little town to big city, and found out very quickly that I was highly unemployable. And so I had read a book. Actually, had my parents order a book from the back. This will date me, from the back of a magazine, something about helping businesses grow, when I was 13. And it turned out to be very much a watered down version of management consulting that someone had written, and was selling it through, classified ads in the back of a magazine. I still have the book to this day. And so eventually what I did is I started knocking on doors to help them. And, so I've been coaching longer than there has been coaches, at least in this space. And that's, in part where some of this comes from when I talk about, how many clients. I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time. There are very, very few people on this planet that can talk about numbers of clients like I can, just because it's been so long. I was actually having a beverage with a friend of mine last summer. We're sitting around the campfire, and he said to me, he says, just in your home city of Calgary, how many coaches do you think have come and gone in the last just 20 years? And, as I'm sure you can appreciate, and there's literally thousands. Most coaches can't afford to pay attention, never mind their bills. And, here we are, working with thousands of clients, doing millions of dollars of business, and, almost 3 decades on. So you know what, this is the best thing in the world, as far as I'm concerned, that I can do, because I get the privilege to impact in a positive way, high achievers, entrepreneurs, individuals who want to change their life, career, business, and relationships.
Great. And before we go into a few of your businesses, because you've had quite a few, what do you see as the main things getting in the way of owners being able to grow their business?
I think there's probably more than one, but complacency tends to take top shelf in that response. I think mismanagement, lack of information, lack of knowledge. I was reading an article this morning, and I'm one of those people that spends a great deal of time becoming better at what I do, and I probably invest about $150,000 a year USD. I'm bettering myself, and I don't mean on clothes, watches, or jewelry. I'm talking about becoming knowledge based, I guess I'll put it that way. And it was talking about people that think they're better. None of us are going to improve in a way and in the timeline ourselves we can with somebody. And if there is someone out there, and this article was, and it was very interesting for me, this article was saying that some people, their egos are far too large, and it stopped them dead in their tracks from actually going and getting a high level coach, because they have the misconception that it's too expensive, and they can do it all themselves, and these types of things. But at the end of the day, the book E-Myth or E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber, who I interviewed some time ago when I was down in the US. He talks about just because you can go and incorporate a company in the jurisdiction you live in doesn't make you an entrepreneur. Just because you're a good plumber, or graphic designer, or consultant, or whatever it is you do, doesn't make you an entrepreneur. Most people are good at what they do, and they're just doing, as he says. And they are technicians suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure. And people smile, of course, when you say that, but there's a reality here. Most people, when they leave their quote unquote job and go start a business, end up putting far more time into their company than they ever did as a job without the added benefits.
I love how Gerber clearly breaks that down to the three main roles: entrepreneur, manager, and technician. And exactly as you just said, they have that seizure, think I've got a dickhead boss, I could do this better, and get out, start their business, and then realize they've got all these other hats they've got to wear. It's my favorite book.
Absolutely. That's only because you haven't read mine yet, though.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe go back to the journey, how you got into business from the first one.
So the first one very much was and has been working with entrepreneurs, high achievers, and leadership teams for the past almost 3 decades. Over the course of that period of time, I've been involved in about 43 other companies, and that is everything from a legal services firm to property management to real estate, which I still am involved in every day. And the list really goes on and on. And the reason I share that, it's not about one specific industry or profession or vertical. And there seems to be this underlying thought in amongst a lot of entrepreneurs, especially new ones starting out, that business that they're in is different from others. And I want to be very clear about something. Well, you may be in a different vertical, a different profession, a different industry. Every business is a sales organization. If you aren't selling, you aren't in business. So you have to be selling. You can't just start a business and have someone else do your sales for you. You're going to have to be able to do that. And the fundamentals of business don't change. Yes, some of the approaches and how you generate business and how you, whatever those details are, those may be slightly different. But at the end of the day, every business, and people ask me, when you coach, Shawn, are you in a specific niche or niche? And my answer is not really. Yeah, I work with small and medium-sized businesses. I will work with some leadership teams. But the reality of it is, when it comes to building a business, it doesn't matter what the business is. There's always and only one outcome. It's profitability.
Yeah.
And growth. And if you're not doing that, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Did you just buy yourself a job?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I asked about the issues, the first thing you said was complacency. So you see a lot of business owners just distract themselves, I guess, procrastinate with the day-to-day whirlwind. Quite easy to get stuck in your inbox rather than, as Gerber coined, working on the business.
Well, we tend to, and this is a part of the besides the traditional description in my world, at least, of entrepreneurship, and where if I don't do it all myself, it's not done right. One of the things that typically happens is we focus on those things we want to do, and the things we don't relish get relegated to the back of the truck, the back of the desk, the somewhere, until they become fires, and then we get focused on putting out fires, which is a non-productive or not a high leverage activity. And if we're engaged in activities that are not high leverage, the challenge is we limit our growth. And what happens when we keep in mind, practice makes perfect. So when we keep practicing doing this in our businesses, eventually all we end up doing is putting out fires. So in other words, we're not growing, we're not expanding, we're not scaling, because we only want to do the things that we relish or enjoy, and the things that we don't get relegated to somewhere we can't see, because out of sight, out of mind, and then they blow up, and then we're forced to deal with them. And then that becomes the norm. We wake up every day and we put out the biggest fire first, and by the time we go to bed, we're exhausted and wiped out, because all we've done all day is not what we're supposed to be doing, not those high leverage activities to serve and support whatever it is we do, whatever industry we're in, but focused only on putting out fires.
Yeah. So true. I see that many, many times, and I certainly did that at the start of my business career 24 years ago as well.
You're dating yourself now.
Yeah, that's right. So what year did you start your first business, and how old were you?
Would have been 1990, probably 1992 or 1993. So I would have been, I don't know, 21-ish, somewhere in that area.
Yep, correct. And do you have any key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
I think there's a lot of those numbers, but I'll share this. And this is the largest out of the 44 companies. In 1999, I bought a little consulting firm that had been around for about 6 or 7 years, was doing about 100,000 a year. So not a lot of money by the time you pay overhead and someone to work for you and, the bills. And between 1999 and 2007, built it from 100,000 a year to the last fiscal year when I sold, we did $133 million.
Wow.
So, don't get me wrong. I didn't do it all by myself. Yeah, my name was all over the place, but, and I signed checks, but at the end of the day, that was a team. And I think one of the hardest things, and I'll put this out there for every single one of those entrepreneurs that wants to grow, scale, and expand. Somewhere around the $9 million mark, I hired, and we went through all the steps, and it was about a month and a half process to hire a CEO. And because this, I'll reference what I said earlier about the entrepreneur syndrome. We hold it all close, and if it isn't me touching every piece of paper, email, phone call, etc., then it's not done right. The following morning after he had been hired on, and I showed up to the office at 6 a.m. and he was already there, and he looked at me and said, "Shawn, what are you doing here?" I said, "Working." He said, "Yeah, that's fine. It's your company. But remember, you hired me for a reason. Stay out of my way." That was probably one of the toughest things someone had ever said to me, because I was always that guy driving the bus.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, we worked together very, very well. And between then and the time we sold it, which was I don't know, about 4.5 or 5 years, we went from 9 to the 133. So together we did well, and that it was sold to one of the big four around the world, we all know. And he's still there. And the hardest thing an entrepreneur is going to have to do if they want to do anything beyond being that technician that Gerber talks about is let go.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. One of the first companies I started, web design development company in Melbourne, late 1999, with 3 business partners. About 4 years in, we decided to step out of the leadership role. One mistake was we didn't have a clear leader in the business, so we appointed a young gun, 23-year-old, as the general manager, and we stepped back. And I think we did a reasonable job by saying it's your decision, and we were able to grow quite quickly from there. He's still there now, 24 years later, getting that critical hire. So that's great. You've nailed it. You got the right person to be at the front of the bus right at the start. So what was the time frame between when you started the business and when you sold that one?
From 1999 to 2007.
Right, great.
I don't advocate or advise anyone to do what I did, because honestly, I almost killed myself doing that. And at the same time, had 2 other companies. It's I'll say this because there are a lot of people that it's a belief system, it's a perspective, it's conditioning, perhaps. If you listen, I'm a farm kid that used to go out in the springtime and plant thousands of plants, and whatever the case may be. I hated tomatoes for many years because I remember planting, acres and acres of tomatoes as a kid. And, my dad was very old school, and we did it by hand. There was no machines. I despised that type of work. And if you want it and you're prepared to do what it takes, and yes, it's an incredible investment of time, energy, effort, money. And some of you listening and watching this, you know what I'm talking about. Others of you want this. You can do it. And yes, you're going to have to do things that make you extremely uncomfortable. You're going to have to let go of things that it's your baby, and you invested your heart and your soul and your sweat and your blood and tears. But at the end of the day, you can't grow it. You can't see it soar if you don't let go.
No, totally agree.
That doesn't mean you're not working hard.
No. So across those 8 years, how many full-time equivalents did you start with when you bought the firm, doing about $100,000 a year? And how many full-time equivalent team members did you have when you exited?
Equivalent which? Sorry, what did you say?
Full-time equivalent. So a number of people doing a 40-hour week.
When I bought, I think there was 2.
Yep.
When we sold, I think we were up to about 100 and probably 50 or 55.
Wow, that's phenomenal growth, Shawn. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I don't think I have yet.
I reckon half the guests answer that way.
I'll say this. I I'm very blessed and fortunate to have achieved what I have in life. It doesn't mean I'm done. And so many people, I'm a little behind the curve compared to some. I have 2 young kids, and there are people my age that have grandkids by now. But I look at it from this perspective, and people ask me, you're going to build another big one, you're going to grow the one you have, whatever. And the answer is, could I? Yes. Once you've done it once, it becomes a little bit easier because you kind of have a roadmap to follow. And I might at some point in time, but my focus right now is I have 2 young kids, and I invest as much time, my time with them as I can. Have I succeeded on a lot of fronts? Yes. From a business standpoint, I think this is just a little bit of a stepping stone, and you just keep going. I think my focus right now is split, and I share this with a lot of, I think, with parents who are driven and motivated, like you and I were talking about earlier in the conversation, where it's a harmony, between family time and with your spouse, as well as in the business. And, that's everyone has to find their own. There's no such thing as balance, in my opinion.
Yeah. And as we were talking before, we hit record, I think we've both got the curse that we love what we do. So it's quite hard not to work. How do you find that challenge?
There's 2 things I'll say about that. One, I'm very strategic in what I do. You can't manage time. And everyone, we've been talking about this for generations. You can manage time. You should manage time. You're not managing time. You can't manage time. You get all there is. The clock doesn't stop, but you can manage the activities and the time that you're given or blessed with. So what are those high leverage activities that I need to be engaged in order for me to see the outcomes, results, and increase that I want to see? And what are the things I shouldn't be doing? And to be very clear for all of you watching and listening now or down in the future, you cannot grow, scale, or expand a business without knowing what you should not be doing.
Yep.
And then not doing it.
What does success look like to you?
I don't know that there is a definition. Napoleon Hill says that the book Think and Grow Rich, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I think success is probably one of those buzzwords that's been beaten to death and bastardized over the course of the last 25 or 30 years. But I'll say this. Success to me is about being able to get up in the morning and have a positive impact on people's lives. Success to me is about being able to, I've got a gentleman that in the last year has seen a 90% increase in his business as a direct result of me working with him. And that's not here to necessarily brag, but it is certainly something that I'm proud of on an ongoing basis. So those types of stories, of which there are tons, that's what this is really about. In my mind, that's what success. There's a lot of people, I'll say this to you, there are a lot of people that ask me why I do what I do, especially when I step off a stage or I'm speaking at an event. And Bob Proctor, who was my first coach 25, 26, 27 years ago, who passed away a year ago this month, he said something to me many years ago. He said, Shaun, none of us are getting out of this alive. And he was right. But I've also been told something else, and it's when it's my turn to check out, and let's be clear, I'm not looking forward to that anytime soon, that your life flashes before your eyes. And if that is in fact the case, I want to make sure it's a movie worth watching.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you can't take anything else with you.
That's right. Yeah. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Have a multi-pronged, minimum 3-pronged proactive approach to marketing. The idea that you're going to do business by default and rely on referrals is unacceptable. The surest way to fail, and that means go out of business, to clarify, is to do business by default. So the idea that you're going to base your business on only referrals may work for a short period of time, but it will eventually catch up with you because you have no control over it. Referral is merely a gift for doing a good job. Accept it as that, be grateful for that, acknowledge that, but you can't control it. So make sure that if you're going to build a business and you're going to be successful at it, you're going to see results and you're going to benefit from going into business rather than having a job. In other words, achieve a high level of freedom, which, by the way, is defined in 3 ways: the ability to do what you want, when you want, and with whom you want. You really need to understand what it takes to grow that business, and a proactive marketing initiative with a minimum of 3 prongs. Because remember, if you have a minimum of 3, if one of them disappears, you're not going out of business tomorrow. And I've watched, especially now, the traditional media is dead. So now if somebody says, hey, I found this magic online to generate clients or leads or prospects, and something happens, somebody changes an algorithm, and they're out of business. So understand, you need to have those prospects, those leads, those clients. Remember, customers are one-off, clients are forever. Have them coming at you. It's not about the lifetime of a client. It's about having a client for life.
Yeah, totally agree. How did you fund your business?
Sweat, blood, and tears. You know what? On a shoestring. That's the honest to God. I was a young kid. I didn't want to do anything as far as loans. I don't know if anyone would give me a loan at that point in time. I went to a print shop and spent $15 on black and white business cards. Websites weren't really a thing yet. I had a cell phone number and a great big GI Joe phone, and yeah, and free evenings and weekends or whatever the crazy plans were way back in the day. And that was how I started business. And I knocked on more doors on more streets than you can possibly shake a stick at. I made more phone calls, and most of the time, I would do the phone calls from home because I didn't want to use cell phone minutes.
Yeah. So, in any of your businesses, did you take investors on?
Yeah, two of them I have. Yeah. One of the pieces of advice I'll give you, your listeners and the audience is this: if you're going to do some kind of equity and sell something, shares, whatever you're going to do, make sure the people you bring on board, you're not taking their last $100,000 or whatever that dollar figure or that figure is. Because here's the key. They will monopolize. They will do everything they can to own your time. And, even that big company we're talking about, we're in 133 million, all that great stuff. I brought in some investors and I thought I was doing amazing things at the outset where, they invested 100 or 500,000 and it was all they had. That was their retirement. That was their life savings. And I got to a place where I couldn't do any work because they were phoning me constantly, daily basis. Some of them, hey, what's going on? How's the company doing? And eventually what happened is I brought in a partner who bought all of them out and they were all happy because they came out ahead. And I had one partner and him and I met, every month for breakfast for 4 hours, went through what we were doing, what it was, and it worked. So be aware of who you partner with because who you partner with can actually determine your outcome, good or bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. I sit on 5 boards, chair most of them at the moment, and have a varying shareholder base across those. At least one company has a few noisy shareholders, if I'm going to be polite. And it is such a distraction, as you well know, Shaun, just taking your eye off the ball and where the growth is. So as I like to say, or stole from Mark from Manager Tools, recruitment's the most important job a manager does. And then if you think about that, you go further upstream and say, well, the first recruitment you do, if you are taking obviously investors on, is those shareholders. So you've got to make sure you get them right, make sure they're nice people and they're not assholes. But that's a really good point that I'd never heard before, that people are going to worry about their money a lot more if it is their last dime or last cent. So that is really good advice.
I have a policy, and I've built since I sold that company in 2007. I've built a number of others, worked with clients to do the same sort of thing over the years. And I'll say this. And there are times where, I had a client, this is probably back in the beginning of 2020, right before COVID hit. And he had somebody come to him. The guy said, listen, I know you, I trust you. I've known you for 10 or 15 or whatever years, but I've got $1 million. Will you take it? And so he phoned me. He's like, I got $1 million. And I said, he's just starting this process. I said, perfect, let's meet. And, it was this guy's, this was everything. This was his life. If that $1 million disappeared, this guy would be destitute, living in a refrigerator box in the back alley somewhere. And I said to him, don't take the money. And, he was ready to fire me. And we sat down and had a conversation. He explained this to the gentleman and didn't take the money. And, ended up, this is not something that happened by chance. We had somebody that we were working with who ended up investing about 85% of what he needed, in his raise. And so at the end of the day, it worked out a lot better. He did end up working with this guy, but at a much, smaller figure, so that somebody wasn't trying to monopolize his time. And it's not an intentional thing, but, if you're in your, 50s, 60s, 70s, and you give somebody pretty much everything you've saved your entire life, no matter what that figure is, it doesn't matter if it's 100,000 or 100 million. To you, it's an incredible amount of money.
Yeah. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
100%. 100%. Yes. I wouldn't change what I do. It doesn't mean to be the only one. I'm a business guy. I love working with people, but I'm a business guy. Even when I'll give you an example. During the first month of COVID, between March 15th or April 15th of 2020, just in the city I live in, 10,000 small businesses closed their doors permanently. That to me is painful. Okay. And they closed their doors because of restrictions put in place. And whether you believe it, buy it, don't, whatever your thoughts are on government and what happened, 3 years ago. The point is there's 10,000 entrepreneurs who were left on the street, so to speak. And to me, that just rips. I gotta be very honest with you. My wife doesn't understand it, but it rips me apart. And when I hear of a company that's in trouble, I'm one of those guys that literally picks up the phone and says, "Hi, can I talk to the founder, the president, or whoever? What's the solution?" And sometimes there isn't one, because it's too far gone. But I always look for. I always approach a situation this way, no matter who it is, what it is. There is always a solution. Now, in those cases, where the ones that have gone too far, the solution is that someone has to bankroll it. And if there's too much to bankroll, it's not worth doing. But that's a perspective from somebody who's passionate, I guess, about business.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah. When you encounter challenging times, no matter if it's from your own mismanagement or it's external or something over which you have no control, like COVID, we were referencing a moment ago, and you've got payday coming up in a week or 2 weeks, and you don't have enough money in the bank to pay that, and no prospect coming in, at least not initially. That's probably the most stressful thing, at least from my own perspective, that I have had to experience. And I've done that. I mean, when I started out and the things were going good for the first, and this happens to a lot of startups. Because, and I'll explain this because I think it's a really good point, especially you're getting into business for the first time and you're, got your toes over the edge of the precipice and you're ready to jump. And Bob Proctor used to say, jump off the building and grow wings on the way down. And I think don't do it literally, but I think that's a good idea. The point in all of this is, though, most entrepreneurs do good for the first 8 months, 12 months, because they have a sphere of influence. They have a network of people, but they think they're doing amazing for that first year. And all of a sudden they come to the outer edges of that sphere of influence, and they haven't been doing any proactive, and this is what we were talking about a moment ago, proactive marketing, networking, building those strong, powerful, and high trust relationships, and they die. The business is done. So, it's a tough one. There are people out there, and this is not the best use of your energy by any stretch of the imagination, but there are people out there, when you point a gun at them, they can dance. And all I mean by that is when the stress is on and they have that payday in 2 weeks, they come up with payday and they can do it. And there are companies, even larger companies that, I'm going to say between $5 and $25 million, that still operate in a very tight budget. And that founder, that president, that somebody knows how to dance. And I don't say that's the best way to build a business or operate a business, but it certainly happens on a regular basis. And sometimes, if you're better at it, they say that there's one of the most successful men in the world. There was an interview recently, and he said 70% of all billionaires, and this is an interesting statistic, are engineers. So there's a reason why those who are very analytical and process driven succeed at a high level.
Yeah.
I'm not saying if you're not an engineer, you can't succeed, but
yeah. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value
to clients? That's a good question. I've always been it's one of our tenets in our company and all our companies that I've been involved in is every interaction we have to deliver a wow. I'm not saying we're perfect. And certainly we've made mistakes. I make mistakes every day and probably will continue to. But the drive, the ambition is to deliver a wow every time. And I think for me, it's about letting go. It's about, you can't grow and serve and support more people, more clients, if you aren't willing to let go. And there's a certain amount of risk involved. And I think, growing up the way I did in the conditioning I had, I was certainly risk averse.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth? I mean, that's phenomenal growth from 100 grand to 133 million.
Managing people is always people are always your wild card.
Yeah.
So there is no question in my mind whatsoever that, picking the right people, you and I were talking about this a moment ago around, picking the right leader, the CEO, whatever that is. Those are always a challenge, because no matter how astute you might be, no matter how much a people person or how intuitive you think you might be, I don't think there's any surefire way to pick the right people. And have I made mistakes? Yeah, I will share one, maybe two tips. Here's one. If you're going to hire someone high level in your business, you're typically going to hire someone that is similar to you in personality type. Okay. If it is a high level position, do interview one and have someone else who has the opposite operating mindset. So if you're right brain, hire someone who's left brain, have your spouse, have your partner, have your somebody interview that person. And then conversely, if you're left brain, do it the other way. The other one too is if you're hiring for an executive type role, during your first interview, let them know that you want to get their ex-boss on a phone call or a Zoom call with them. So you can ask them questions. Now, the old boss, typically in most countries and most jurisdictions can't release information because of privacy legislation. However, if consent is granted by this individual that wants a position with you, they can. And so it's an interesting request to make of a prospect that you want to hire, because if they left on bad terms, they're not going to want their old boss on a Zoom call or a phone call with you. But when you start talking about, executive salaries and that person being entrusted with running your baby, so to speak, it's one of the best things you can do to weed out some of the ones you may not running your company, especially if there's a concern about running into the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I picked up from, I assume you would have read Top Grading by Dr. Bradley Smart. He's got the threat of reference check, which he says put at the start of the interview process because it keeps the candidates honest, and then obviously follow through and actually do the reference check.
I was doing it before I met him. I actually shared the stage with him probably 10 years ago at an event. I think it was in Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love your take on that as well, especially for a senior hire, particularly if someone's going to take over your main role as the leader of the business, is to actually get on a Zoom call with their ex-manager. I think that's brilliant. What do you love most about growing a small business?
The challenges. I thrive on challenges. A lot of people don't. They're afraid of them. But I think, at the end of the day, the challenges can be big or small, depends on you, depends on your level of determination, tenacity, knowledge, experience. And if you choose to grow, and I don't mean physically grow, I mean become better at what you do on a daily basis. And most people today, when they finish whatever level of school, if it was high school or college, university, whatever, they close the book and they never open another one. I'm the other guy. I read lots and write some. And so, I think that's important.
Yeah, totally agree. What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Did you say mind shift?
Yeah.
That I can't do it all myself. That I'm not invincible.
Yeah, that young naivety that we take on is great in one sense. We've got a lot of drive and motivation and gusto, but also it does limit our expansion, as you were talking about, our professional development.
I still have lots of drive. I just think it's better channeled than it once was.
Yeah. The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
This is a really interesting one, and a lot of people don't like the idea that we operate by habit or paradigm. But once we start to understand that most of our decisions aren't our own, they're unsolicited gifts from parents, educators, and religious influences as we grew up, that we need to shift our paradigm and we need to be the one in control of the decisions we make. I think that's key. Your life's predicated on two things: one, the decisions you make, and two, the relationships you establish, nurture, and build. And in any business, I don't care what your business is, the first decision you need to make is, we talked about marketing already in our conversation, is relationships. A vast majority of what goes on today, people come to me all the time, they say, Shaun, I want to do the $100,000 deal, I want to do the $1 million, $10 million, $100 million. And, this is not going to happen because you posted something on Craigslist or some, classified site, Facebook, whatever. You don't go and get those deals. You get these deals because you took the time, you invested the time, energy, effort, and even money sometimes to build those strong, powerful, high-trust relationships over a coffee, a glass of wine, dinner, whatever that is, to build those relationships. No one phones your office, no one phones you wherever you are and says, hey, I got $1 million, I want to buy X. That's not a thing. That might happen one in, 100 million. So yeah, it's one of the fundamentals of business is relationships, strong, powerful, high trust relationships. And that translates across the board to your personal life as well.
Yeah. Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course and add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? You've obviously hired a lot of people over the what now, 31 years you've been in business?
Easy now, easy now. I have hired. It's probably in the thousands, and I've been very fortunate to have some really good hires. I've made some mistakes as well. And one of those mistakes is really not doing my due diligence in hiring, especially for higher level roles, management, directors, the vice president type executive roles, where I've circumvented the process, even that we have or I have created inside of our own companies or that kind of thing, because sometimes we're in a rush, and the rush is usually self-imposed.
Warm body syndrome. I just need someone to fill this role.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? We're busy.
Mm.
And again, I understand that everyone's busy, but I always do this. It's like when I'm called in to speak to real estate investors, whether commercial or residential, and people go out and decide they're going to invest in real estate, and then they say, and let's say it's residential, and they've got this home, they've got a big mortgage payment, and the house is worth, I don't know, let's say it's worth $500,000 or $1 million, whatever it is. And the first person that comes along with a couple dollars for the deposit and first month's rent, they hand them the keys.
Mm.
And my question is, if you had a car that was worth $1 million and somebody walked up to you in the street and said, "Hey, nice car, can I take it for a spin?" Would you hand them the keys? And they were like, "Well, no, I'm not crazy." I'm like, "Okay, but you have $1 million asset. You're desperate because the next month mortgage payments is coming out. And so the guy came along and gave you a couple grand and you handed him keys." So you've done the same thing effectively. And so, I translate that back, right?
What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Empower people. Don't micromanage. The more you trust and empower them, the more that culture will become one that people want to become a part of. I'm not saying it should be a free-for-all. I'm not saying there aren't guidelines in place. I'm not saying there should be issues or concerns around whatever happens within the team happens. But if you empower people and you give them room to grow and make decisions, you change the dynamic and the culture of the team for good.
Yeah. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
There is no such thing as balance. Full stop. There is a harmony, and I use the term intentionally. For everyone, balance is going to be a different thing. So you use the word harmony. There are some days where I'm very clear. Before you and I hopped on to chat today, I had a conversation with my wife. I have to travel next week. I have a meeting in another city that's 3 hours away. I'm going to be driving up there for part of the day. And she says, "Well, it's your son's, my youngest, birthday." I said, "I understand that. I'll be back for dinner." You do what you need to do, and you create a harmony. So at the end of the day, I think it's about harmony. It's finding what works for you, what works for your family, what works for those who are close to you and you love.
Now, on professional development, you mentioned earlier you invest about $150,000 US a year in that. Any other comments on professional development? You've obviously also made the point of how important it is to do it. Any other advice there for the audience?
Yeah, you know what? Be strategic and intentional about this. Don't have 15 books sitting on your nightstand with the intention of reading them and never actually reading them. I'm not saying every book you pick up is going to be one that grabs your attention as a page turner. But on average, I'll read one book a month at home. I'll read typically one here at work and with our team, and we'll review it with our team. And then I have a coach. I have had a coach since I started almost. Bob Proctor, who most of you know from the movie The Secret, and then some. The Secret was the brainchild of Rhonda Byrne from Australia. Proctor was Canadian, he was from Toronto. And so I worked with him that's a really good story. Most people that I work with, I share the story of how him and I met, my mindset around coaches. The last thing in the world I was ever going to do was hire a coach. It had never dawned on me that good coaches made the kind of money that I ended up paying Bob. I think if you're going to do something, you need to work hand in hand and side by side with somebody. You need to invest. And when I say invest, I mean your investment in a coach, and it doesn't have to necessarily be me, as long as it's a good one. And I mean, from a track record standpoint, from an experiential standpoint, your investment is going to be that of almost buying a house.
Yep. And you mentioned you've had coaches as well. What about mentors? Have you had mentors along the way?
So I view coaching and mentor in a different way. Coaching is someone who you are not friends with, who holds your feet to the fire, who, will, and I'll use, you said I swear, so we'll give you shit sometimes
Yep.
when you need it.
Yes.
Will call you out when you're full of BS. That's coaching. But a coach is also someone who's knowledgeable and experienced, who can answer questions for you, who can guide you in the right directions. Mentor is someone who you're not necessarily paying. It's somebody who has your best interest in heart. It could be a friend. It could be someone you sought out to mentor you. But they're not going to hold you accountable like a coach will. They're not going to give you that shit. They're not going to call in your BS. They're just going to give you some advice when you ask for it. So have I had mentors? I have had mentors, but I don't think one replaces the other at all.
No, I agree. Yeah. Do you have a board of directors or advisors? You've obviously had.
In this company, I don't. In past companies, yes.
Yeah.
When I made a commitment, so this is an interesting little story. When I made a commitment many years ago, before I had kids, that when and if I had kids, I would spend as much time as I possibly could with them. I didn't get that privilege with my dad, and don't get me wrong, I have no complaints about my childhood. He was just a very busy guy. And so when my oldest will be 12 here shortly, when he was born, within about 12-month period, I, for lack of better terminology, I shrunk the company. And I get a lot of questions. We build another $100+ million company, and yeah, at some point I probably will. For now, I've done incredible things. I work with incredible people. I've worked with, whether it's, people talk about, who do you work with? Who's your target audience? I work a lot with entrepreneurs and leadership teams, but I've worked with recording artists. I've worked with folks from Hollywood, from NFL, NBA, NHL. There's no really limit, and I've had there's nobody that can get into this and do it at a high level without feeling the reward of being able to wake up in the morning and watch the positive transformation in the individuals or the teams you have the privilege to work with.
Yeah. Well, out of interest, so change your results now. So what year did you start that? How many full-time team members did you start with, and where are you at now?
I think we have about 6 or 8 staff.
Yep.
And this company itself has been around since 2004. So I've built a few companies simultaneously.
Yep.
They grow at the speed based on the input of time, effort, and energy.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Shaun, you're one of the few I've had on that's exited a business, or businesses in your case. Any advice for the audience thinking about exiting one day?
Yeah, don't make a mistake that most do, and start planning now. Hire a coach to listen. At some point in time, you're not going to be the face of the business anymore. So start removing your face from the business now. It should stand on its own with its own brand, or you should co-brand it, and that's an important step. Start that succession planning now. The key to that, though, is not about hiring someone that's an end-of-life counselor. It's really about making your business a turnkey operation. And all that very simply means, don't let the term, I've had people say, well, I don't know what that means and I don't know how to do it. All it means is this, that if you stepped away from your business today and you took a nice big fat check and handed someone the keys, the business would keep operating at least at the level it currently is, perhaps even grow.
Yeah.
And you can't, I'll be very clear about something. 99.9% of entrepreneurs today can't do it because they don't have the time. They're busy running their businesses.
Yeah.
Unless they work with somebody.
Yeah. All right, Shaun, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
I think for most people, it's motivation, because they're focused on what they need, and there is no inspiration in needs. You have to know what you want. The inspiration comes from knowing what you want.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
I think there's a couple, but I probably go Think and Grow Rich.
Yep. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Not necessarily. I'm old fashioned, and some people will tell you that. Some of my clients will tell you that. I'm much more about doing stuff in person. So I really put an effort. COVID was not my favorite time, I can assure you of that. But putting myself out there, I travel probably once a month throughout US or Canada to attend events, to put myself in the way of that knowledge and information that I know I want and need.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
I don't think I can say. I think I'm going to get 2 if I can. One is peer mentorship. Get yourself into a mastermind or a peer mentorship group. but one that is going to act as if, if you had 20 members in this group, they're acting as 20 coaches. I think that's a key to you in this. And the other one is you need to have a coach. And I'm going to be very blunt. This article I shared with you earlier. Don't let your ego stand in the way of investing in yourself for a coach. If you're serious about it, and it doesn't have to be Shawn. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody about it, but if you're serious about this, coaching needs to be this. It needs to be a holistic approach. It's not about sales, marketing, process, systems, mindset, nothing. It's about all of that. Because if you're really good at one thing, for example, let's say you're really good at sales. You can sell, but you have no one to sell to. What do you have?
Yep.
You're really good at marketing, but you can't sell. You have a problem. And if you're not straight the 6 inches between your ears, you're not going to do any of it. So coaching is a holistic process. Coaching is walking hand in hand and side by side with someone who's been there and who has the experience to help you avoid potholes and to collapse timeframes.
Yep. Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 31 years ago?
Hire an assistant.
Yep.
No question in my mind.
Great. Thank you very much.
Even if you can't afford it.
Yeah.
Find a way.
Yep. You got to delegate, push down those lower value tasks so you can focus on where the real value is at.
And today, if you've been around and been doing that for a year or two, there's download, delegate, and automate.
Yep.
Right. Those things help you grow and expand, help you scale.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time today, Shawn. I've really appreciated it and I've got a lot out of it, as I'm sure the audience will. I'm sure we get to speak for a couple more hours. Congratulations on the growth. 44 businesses now since 1992 and some amazing results. So congratulations to you and the team.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.